Okay, Paul, how long have you been unemployed?
Over 12 months now.
And was that some blameworthy on your part? Accident? What happened?
Well, initially I did have an accident, but I was made redundant back in June, and no fault of my own. And I've been, to the Social Security job zone on numerous occasions. 2, 3, 4 times a week. Not been able to secure full-time employment.
What sort of job would you want to do? What sort of job were you doing?
Well, I was a driver for a furniture company, but I'm willing to do whatever I feel I'm able to do, really.
What sort of age are you?
I'm over 50.
Is that a particular problem there? Are there jobs for younger people?
Well, yeah, I suppose it is getting a bit difficult. Yes, some people do prefer to take on younger people. If they're willing to train somebody, I'm sure they ideally want somebody in their teens rather than.
What offers do they make of training for you, retraining? Is there anything? We hear lots of schemes being supposedly offered. What do they actually offer?
Well, they do offer some training, but you get some maybe 3 weeks intensive training and 5 weeks work experience, but you're not getting paid during that time. So if you're not on income support, which I'm not, because I've got a mortgage, how are you supposed to live during that period?
The fact that you're attempting to own a property is actually creates a hardship of its own.
Yes, it's a handicap, really.
Yes. Action, the understanding of those important clauses.
Housing occupied a fair bit of the discussion today. A certain sluggishness on getting H1, H2, H3, whatever the numbers are, implemented, and also the lack of a home buyers scheme, which means that the cheaper end of the market, if there is such a thing in Jersey, you can't get really up and going. Is that a satisfactory action of the current aspect of the island plan?
I think it is. I mean, the island plan process itself actually set up the groups. We've got a body of work that has to be undertaken by a specific period of time to an organised timetable. And I think we're moving ahead pretty well to deliver on the things that the states have asked me to deliver on. Specifically, I'm not keen on home buy, never have been. It was a deferred payment system. It doesn't deliver in my books, and I think equally some of the more limited shared equity schemes don't deliver. That's why I've taken it upon my shoulders, so to speak, to kind of push forward with a different initiative on affordable homes, which I'm kind of coining the word truly affordable homes. And I think I can deliver, if I'm allowed to, on state-owned sites, large units with better amenities in town for £200,000.
Like all the candidates on the platform, I'm sure I am ashamed of a situation where a minority of landlords exploit the vulnerability of tenants, particularly the unemployed. The solution is not easy. I think that these things flourish in darkness, and that some spotlight ought to be placed upon them, because when these things are exposed, it's much easier to find a solution. I remember that many years ago there was a scandal about the standard of accommodation in the agricultural industry, and it was given a great deal of publicity. And the result of that was that standards in the agricultural industry, while maybe not perfect, have certainly gone up a great deal. The other thing that I think needs to be said is that we should do something about the ownership of homes in Jersey. The percentage of people owning their own property in Jersey is 60%, whereas in the UK and even in Guernsey it is 70%. We ought to resuscitate our state's loan scheme to make it possible for young people in particular to get their foot on the housing ladder. Thank you.
Thank you very much. A very good question. Yes, I am not happy about this. I am rather embarrassed that such a wealthy island, we still have people suffering under these conditions. It is wrong. We urgently need legislation to introduce. We urgently need legislation to introduce security and protection for tenants. Family affordable homes, and I'm not necessarily talking about large 4- and 5-bedroom homes, small, appropriate, family affordable homes need to be built, and we need to reintroduce something similar to the old state's loan scheme, which saw many hundreds, if not thousands, of local families put a foot on the housing ladder. And this scheme, the repayment of any loans or funding to help families get onto the ladder would be no more onerous than a reasonable rental commitment. You asked what I would do if elected. I would try and persuade the appropriate departments and politicians leading those departments to bring the necessary legislation. If I was not successful at that, I would have no hesitation in bringing private members' propositions to introduce the necessary laws. Thank you.
This is something very dear to my heart, because when I was manager of the Citizens Advice Bureau, I campaigned for years for a tenancy deposit protection scheme. But there is good news around the corner. The states have approved a draft residential tenancies law, under which regulations will allow for the holding of tenants' deposits. And under the Control of Housing and Work law, which is a new law that we recently approved, a non-qualified person in a residential unit, as defined in the residential tenancies law, will have security of tenure. So there is good news coming. Also, the health department are looking at a law to look at standards in lodging house and private lodgings. So there is things coming, but it's taking an enormous amount of time. But I can assure you and other people here who are concerned on these issues, it's matters that are already being dealt with by the states, and new members will not have to bring their own propositions. Thank you.
We're a small island, and we control or endeavour to our population level, not only through job licences, and we've spoken quite a bit about that throughout these hustings, but also through housing control. And unfortunately, one of the unintended consequences of that, which I think you're absolutely right, there hasn't really been a light shone upon it, is the conditions which some individuals in our community living in that unqualified sector. And I've got to say, it's absolutely and completely unacceptable. As Francis has said, things are being done to alleviate that. Yes, there will be a tenancy deposit scheme. Yes, there will be security of tenure in the unqualified sector. The housing department perhaps has historically only really looked at social housing within our community. It now plans to, in a way, change its mission. Yes, it's going to ensure that social housing is appropriately invested in, but it will also turn itself into something much more strategic, so it can look at housing generally. And these are the very issues that it will need to address, and I know they're committed to addressing because I've been sitting on that transformation programme, and we absolutely, once and for all, have to say, no, these are issues which must be addressed. We cannot live with them anymore because it's unacceptable. Thank you.
It was quite interesting, actually. I was impressed by some of the members on the scrutiny panel, and considering it's probably their first, or one of their first hearings, one of their quarterly public meetings with the Minister, I thought they generally did quite well. I was less impressed with the ministerial team and the part that they had to play, let's say. And just for the record, it's very interesting to note that there were no accredited media there. The JEP didn't have even one journalist. Channel Television were nowhere to be seen, and the radio were nowhere to be seen. Thankfully there were bloggers there. We had obviously yourself, another well-known blogger in Jersey, and I turned up just to take some notes, which I, partly for personal reference, which may also transpire into a blog. Now I mention that for a specific reason, because actually we've had specific comment from the media early on in the week. We had the JEP leading with reports about foster children, that there aren't enough foster carers due to the economic downturn. It's difficult for families who are often working two jobs to encourage them to foster or adopt. They're quite happy to run with that story, which is no doubt the result of a press release. But when the follow-up comes for the Minister to be interviewed publicly by the scrutiny panel, they're not there. So that it doesn't really add up. We had also that coincided with the Inspectorate's reports findings this week, which were broadcast quite comprehensively in the media, but again, none of the media were there to actually follow up, apart from the unaccredited media.
The Minister for Health has recently published a report by KPMG it seems to me a pity that it has drawn inspiration mainly from the UK and not also from France and other small territories. But nonetheless, it gives us a platform from which to start. In the next 25 years, demand for health services will obviously increase considerably. To meet that demand, we have either to increase the availability of services or find some other way to deliver what we need in the island to avoid that great cost. My plea is that we should find a Jersey solution, and one that is not necessarily found elsewhere. I want to make two suggestions. The first is that the extent to which private healthcare can bridge the gap is worthy of discussion. The fundamental principle is that we must have a public system of health available that is at the expense of the state and for the benefit of the general public. It would be unacceptable in a civilized society that people could not get medical treatment because they could not afford it. But that does not mean that there is no place for private health care. More than 50% of people in the island already have insurance with Bupa or some similar organisation. Using insurance schemes to buy in health expertise and to bring it to the island for so many days a month may be one way of ensuring that we have available specialist skills that we cannot afford all the time. The second point is that the third sector, that is charities and voluntary organisations, have large resources that could be brought into the equation. Jersey Hospice Care is an inspirational example of what an independent voluntary association can do for the public good. Let us see to what extent the third sector can meet the increasing demand. Thank you.